can't believe that the government has come back to the people with this when we've already voted on it. But basically the so-called the protocol promises amount to nothing. They're not legally binding, and they're basically not worth the paper that they're written on. So I'd like to give you a couple of quotes that had great relevance and were oft repeated last year and are still very, very relevant today. And this is a quote by Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, and he was one of the architects of the Lisbon Treaty. He said, "Public opinion will be led to adopt, without knowing it, the proposals that we dare not present to them directly. All the earlier proposals will be in the new text, but we will be hidden and disguised in some way." And there he is telling us about the deception that is built into the treaty. Just to give you an example of the deception that is built into this treaty, if I can give a quote from the European Charter of Fundamental Rights, which will become legally binding under Article 6 of the TEU in this Lisbon Treaty if it's passed. There's an article in it which says that everybody has a right to life, nobody shall be condemned to death. Sounds great. But when you read on, there's a footnote which says, "A state may make provisions in its law for the death penalty in times of war or imminent threat of war." So what they've done is they've created, as a footnote, they've created a little back door by which they can either dilute that article or negate it entirely. And that's a typical example of the deception that is written into the articles in the treaty. Another quote from the founding father of the EU, Jean Monnet, he said, "Europe's nations shall be guided towards a superstate without their people understanding what is happening. This can be accomplished by successive steps, each disguised as having an economic purpose, but which will eventually and irreversibly lead to federation." So with this Lisbon Treaty, the EU is going to be recognised as a separate state within the UN, separate from the individual member states. And the EU is going to get an unelected president. And the person who's in the running for the presidency is Tony Blair. So if he becomes president of the EU, that means basically that he's going to be president of our country. So Valéry Giscard d'Estaing told us about the deception that's built into the treaty. And he also said how it was purposely made incomprehensible to the average person, so that they can't understand it. This Lisbon Treaty is not a standalone treaty. It's a combination of successive amendments to two previous treaties. There's a clause within the Lisbon Treaty which is known as the self-amending clause, and that's Article 48. That basically means that the EU can interpret any of those articles in whatever way they want, and they don't have to come back to the people. With the Laval judgment that was recently made by the European Court of Justice, it means that immigrants coming into this country can work for below the industry standard wage. That means that it will essentially price our own workers out of the market. And that's bad for our own workers, and it's also bad for settled immigrants here. Ireland's largest craft union, the Technical Engineering and Electrical Union, advocating a no vote to this treaty. Because of EU laws, our farmers and our fishermen are being squeezed out of existence. Our farmers have been forced to sell milk cheaper than cost. And I know that they were given loads of money, basically not to grow, to keep fields empty, and for our fishermen not to fish. But that is a short-term gain for a long-term pain. Not just the pain of our farmers and fishermen, but for the whole country in general. So you have a situation where the 4.2 million people of this country are the voice for the 500 million people all across Europe who didn't get a chance to vote on this treaty. The reason that they won't allow referendums in the other individual member states is because they know, as Charlie Creevy pointed out, that it will be rejected. So it's up to us, as a voice for those 500 million people, to vote no to this treaty. There is a better way. So where is this all going, and what's the ultimate agenda? Well, the ultimate agenda is to create a one world government. The EU is just a stepping stone towards that, where they want to merge the EU with the North American Union, which has been done in stealth under the Security and Prosperity Partnership, and the Asia Pacific Union and the African Union to create a one world government. Now this probably sounds like a crazy conspiracy theory, but if you go to my website, jimcorr.com, and look for the One World Government section, and just look at all the quotes from the elite and their minions talking about the coming one-world government. We would be naive to think that the quest for global domination just went away. It didn't. The future, to give you an idea of the future that they have planned for us, I'll give you a quote from a guy called Zbigniew Brzezinski. And he was the National Security Advisor under Jimmy Carter. Zbigniew Brzezinski is one of the main men behind Obama, along with David Rockefeller and George Soros. And he said in his 1970s book, Between Two Ages, that the future will be a technotronic control grid governed by an elite not subject to traditional values. And there you have it. That's the plans that they have for us, basically.
The North American community, which is being developed right now between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico, to make a borderless community much like the EU.
About a new era of heightened cooperation between Europe and America.
It means open borders, commerce at all costs, and by the way, without the approval of either American voters or the U.S. Congress.
Some of you will know that for many years I've advanced the case for a global Europe.
Qui porteront sur une nouvelle régulation, une nouvelle gouvernance mondiale. Today, Europe can propose the principles and rules that will shape a new global order.
Our regulations should apply to every bank, everywhere, at every time.
With this Lisbon Treaty, what little power that our government has left in terms of running this country is going to be transferred over to the EU. That means that the EU is going to be in control of our police, our army, small as it is, our economy and our government. If you've got a foreign power, which it is basically, being operated through the unelected bureaucrats in Brussels, dictating how we live our lives in this country, that essentially is an end to our independence and an end to our national sovereignty. Now, I believe that our national sovereignty should be guarded. I imagine that our ancestors, who fought long and hard for our independence and our national sovereignty, must be spinning in their graves with this treaty. The yes side have been creating the no side arguments. The pro-Lisbon bias coming from the mainstream media has been frankly unbelievable. It's like the no side has been completely sidelined. The BCI, the Broadcasting Commission of Ireland, came out recently and made a statement saying that they didn't have to give equal coverage to opposing sides. Don't allow yourself to be bullied or scared into voting for this treaty. I believe, as many others do, that there is a better way towards a more democratic EU. If you'd like any more information on this, do visit my website, jimcorr.com. Thank you very much.